Thanks for saving me. ISL. Chapter 3. Naturally, every member of the Pro Hero Fan Association on campus has seen all the news coverage about what happened during the villain attack a couple weeks prior, so it's no surprise that everyone is aware of what took place involving Izuku that day. However, it seems nobody realized the full extent of what happened to him and Todoroki until after the talk show interview airs. "I can't believe you almost died," said one of his friends at their weekly circle meeting. Mayumi is a sweet first-year girl with an affinity for the history and fashion of hero costuming. "Somebody that was so dangerous." Izuku scrubs a hand through his hair bashfully. "Yeah, I'm still sort of processing it myself." One of the older boys smacks him on the back and he stumbles. "It's been a month, Midoriya," he says. "Just accept it. You're a national treasure." "No, I'm sure everyone will forget pretty soon," Izuku says. "The news cycle moves fast." He's flustered, very unused to receiving this amount of attention in meetings. Mostly he stays quiet unless the topic of All Might comes up, on which he is the undisputed expert. "Then I saw your interview," said the president, and Izuku nervously stands at attention under her gaze. "I thought, he spent so much time studying them, of course he wouldn't stop to consider he shouldn't do what he did." She gave him a tiny smile. "You're kinda dumb, but really brave, Midoriya-kun." The club president is a very popular, pretty senior, who has never so much as spoken to Izuku before, and he can barely look her in the eye when he says, "Yes, thank you!" "He's so desperate to be a hero, he'd kill himself trying." Izuku tries not to wince. This last is said by their vice president. She does speak to Izuku frequently. Her favorite hero is Shouto, but it's not usually something he looks forward to. She is generally the reason he stays quiet in most meetings. "I was hoping not, did I, mostly?" he says hesitantly. "I can't hear you when you mutter, Midoriya," she says with a sigh. "Anyway, it's a good thing you know so much about chemistry, since you couldn't have really done anything else." Her quirk is seeing slightly better in the dark than most people, which wouldn't have been any help in the situation either, but she doesn't really hide the fact that she thinks it's lame that he's so obsessed with heroes without having a quirk of his own. Yeah," Izuku says, lacing his fingers together in his lap and staring down at them. He knows he might be pretty useless normally, but he was still able to save Todoroki and Hana. That feels like the most important part, so he tries not to forget it. He remembers what Todoroki said to him. "It was lucky you were there." Izuku smiles a bit. "Just lucky, I guess." "I think it's really lucky you were able to meet Shouto," squeals Mayumi. "He's your favorite. Were you dying?" "I kinda was," Izuku says. He's really amazing in person." "Is he nice?" "Yeah, he is," Izuku confirms eagerly. "I was pretty freaked out about talking to him at first, but he's super nice." "Ah, you must be so happy to be right about that," it says brightly. "And relieved," Izuku admits. "Is that why you said you think it's so obvious he's not cold?" the vice president asks. Uh-oh. Izuku and the vice president don't exactly see eye to eye on Todoroki's hero persona. She's actually a fairly well-known artist among Shouto fans, but while her art itself is very nice, Izuku often feels she has a tendency to portray Shouto as overly well-mannered, standoffish, and indifferent. While a lot of people enjoy this part of Todoroki's appeal, and he can be that way at times, Izuku has always insisted that this misses the nuances of who he actually is as a person. Todoroki has shown plenty of times in the past that he can be very rude, but it often comes from a place of strong emotion. He's also funny and warm and kind. A lot of times people forget all this when they only want to idolize his sexy ice prince persona. But it's just plain wrong. Of course, Izuku has never told her she's wrong to her face, but he has made his opinion on Todoroki clear on Twitter, and his thread about it had gained a surprising amount of retweets. Given their mutual contacts, she had seen it and, quote, retweeted it with a caption that suggested she had been personally attacked to all her followers. They had not been very nice about it. She had apologized during the next club meeting, saying she only wanted to have an open discussion, but regardless, Izuku's Twitter has been private for the better part of 2 years. This is run by him. He never had any followers or anyone interested in him anyway. After the past few days, though, he's been getting a lot of follow requests that he has steadfastly pretended not to notice. "I just wanted to make sure he knew how much I appreciated him reaching out to me," Izuku explains, voice rising at the end into a nervous question. It's not, strictly speaking, a lie. He wasn't even thinking about her specifically when he said that. There was too much else going on. But yeah, it does feel good to have first-hand evidence that he was right all along. He seems to really like you, Mayumi says. Like a lot. She is peering at him with a very significant expression, and he giggles nervously under her scrutiny. Like I said, he's really nice. I guess so, but those pictures are really something. She sings songs. Huh? Izuku asks. What pictures? What do you mean? She gasps loudly. You haven't seen them! He was there, the vice president says loudly. But he was talking and stuff, Mayumi says, oblivious. He might not realize. She whips out her phone and after a moment of searching for something, holds it out to him. This thread said my look! Baffled, Izuku takes her phone from her. It shows some Twitter thread from a popular pro-hero fan blogger that tends to be a little more on the ridiculous side, usually heavy on the memes. It's all a bunch of images from the interview with the caption, every single time Todoroki Shouto looked at Midoriya Izuku like he was the best thing to exist during that interview. They tagged Todoroki in it. Izuku's stomach churns as he scrolls through screenshot after screenshot, all of which feature, as promised, any moment Todoroki was watching Izuku during the interview. Of course Todoroki was watching him. Izuku was telling the story, and Todoroki was listening. He wants to point this out, but he keeps getting distracted the further he looks. He hadn't had the chance to look at Todoroki that much during the interview. He'd been too preoccupied with talking without stuttering, and making a fool of himself. So he really hadn't noticed how intense, practically unwavering, Todoroki's gaze was. And it's not just like he's watching Izuku closely. He looks protective when Izuku gets flustered over being teased, and amused when Izuku is describing his school a job. And in the parts where Izuku is talking about the attack, there's something alight in his eyes. Something soft that makes Izuku's heart do an incredible series of flip-flops. It looks like fondness? Pride? Almost, but it's even warmer. Those are... Izuku says faintly, handing the phone back to his club mate like it's a grenade about to go off. Those are lots of great Shouto pictures, yeah. She looks exasperated at him. You didn't even look at the best one. She tugs on his arm and he reluctantly leans over to look at her screen, his dread mounting ire. The last tweet in the thread is actually a moving gif. Izuku doesn't remember which moment this was, but he seems to be explaining something in a particularly animated and embarrassing fashion. He pauses for a moment and runs a hand through his hair, a nervous take as much as to get it out of his eyes. The gif very rapidly zooms in on Todoroki, who has been watching Izuku intently the entire time, just in time to catch him lick his lips, tongue running over them to wet them. Oh! Izuku utters out loud without quite meaning to say it. Oh! He wants to say, it's just editing! He doesn't know why someone felt the need to make all of this make nothing look like something. It's awful because what if Todoroki sees this and regrets everything? Their interactions, the interview, inviting Izuku to tour the agency. He seems very focused, Mayumi notes. People's lips get dry, Izuku replies defensively. Even Todoroki's, which are perfect in every way. Not that Izuku has been staring at them up close. Oh no, he's not going to be able to stop thinking about Todoroki's lips now, is he? He sighs. At least there's probably no way he saw any of this. Todoroki has millions of followers all tweeting at him about him every day. He retweeted the first one, the girl tells him. So he did. He what? Izuku says dully as his heart pounds out what are undoubtedly its last few ponderous beats. He what? The vice president snaps. Okay, the club president says, clearly sensing nature. It's time to get started, everyone. The vice president looks murderous. Izuku sits as far away from her as possible and tries not to make eye contact the rest of the meeting or think about the fact that Todoroki retweeted a thread of himself staring at Izuku. Izuku has no idea how he's going to face him again at his agency on Friday. Todoroki does not retract his invitation, much to Izuku's everlasting surprise. Come Friday, he finds himself walking up to the posh multi-story office building just outside the city center. It's a building he knows well, given its proximity to his school, which is not entirely a coincidence. His reasons aren't purely creepy, though. He chose to study so close because it's not unusual for the agency to pluck students fresh from his university given their familiarity with it. Or maybe that's still creepy, he's not sure. He smooths down the front of his shirt, feeling nervous about his choice of attire. He actually asked Todoroki earlier in the week about what he should wear, fortunately before the Twitter thread revelation, after which he had felt far too awkward to talk to Todoroki at all. It was an office building, so business wear? Business casual? He'd had no idea. So, still feeling amazed that he could just do it, he'd sent a text. Todoroki had called him back and said, "Just dress casually." "Really?" Izuku asked. "Are you sure?" "It's my agency," Todoroki replied. "How would I not be sure?" That was a valid point. "Maybe you're worried I have crappy business clothes?" Izuku says. Todoroki had let out that little snort of laughter he sometimes did that always made Izuku grin too. "Are they maroon?" he'd asked, and Izuku groaned. It's still so weird to talk to him on the phone. Izuku knows Todoroki can text just fine, but he seems to prefer talking directly, possibly because he always seems to be doing something that requires the use of both hands already, like paperwork or driving or exercising. This is bad for Izuku, who is extremely anxious about talking on the phone always, and still has a hard time dealing with hearing Todoroki's voice directly in his ear. The time Izuku had spoken to him about scheduling the interview had been in the middle of one of Todoroki's workouts and had almost resulted in Izuku's death because he'd been so distracted that he'd ignored a traffic light and nearly walked onto oncoming traffic. Izuku wound up having some thoughts later on that night. There were some scenarios he had imagined that he's not proud of, but it had been nearly impossible not to think about Todoroki's slightly breathless voice right in his ear. So, it's dangerous, but he also really likes talking to Todoroki and listening to Todoroki talk. So the phone is just a necessary evil he has to make his peace with. Todoroki meets him out front, just outside the entrance of the building. Izuku is surprised. He hadn't actually expected to see that much of him today. It's still a weekday, and Todoroki must be extraordinarily busy. He's wearing his recognizable blue hero outfit. Maybe he hasn't yet left on patrol. "Hi!" Izuku says, feeling suddenly out of breath, even though he took the train and the walk was short. "Sorry, were you waiting long?" "I just walked out," Todoroki tells him. "They told me when you arrived at the station." Izuku's information sensors all start pinging so hard he forgets to be shy about Todoroki coming out to welcome him personally. "Wow! What? You have it monitored? Is that part of your jurisdiction, or do you share it with other agencies in the area? Is it for security purposes for the city? Or more like a private security type thing? Do you have a system set up at other stations? And how much coverage?" "I can't tell you the answers to most of these things, because you don't have proper security clearance," Todoroki says, and Izuku deflates. "Oh," he says. "Right. But if you want to come inside," Todoroki continues, "I can have you sign a non-disclosure agreement, and then I can answer some of it." Izuku perks up. "You can?" He can feel himself literally shaking in excitement. This means he isn't just getting a tour, he's getting insider info! The stuff the pros know, or at least some of the stuff. Todoroki inclines his head in the direction of the main entrance. "After you." Izuku scurries toward the doors, and Todoroki squints at the writing on his plain white t-shirt as he goes by. "Dress shirt?" "Oh, yeah," Izuku says, looking down at his chest. "Because you told me to be casual, but I thought this way my intent would still show." Todoroki just looks at him for a moment before shaking his head. "You're strange." Izuku beams at him. "Yeah, I get told that a lot." It's true that Izuku may be biased, but within about 5 seconds of entering the building, he's decided. Todoroki's agency is the most amazing building he's ever been inside in his whole life. "Wow!" He breathes, standing in place and turning in circles to take in the entire glassy atrium. It has no ceiling, soaring up through all the floors with the sky open above them. "That has a cover that extends to create a roof," Todoroki says, "in case of bad weather." Izuku has seen some images of the inside of Todoroki's agency, but as it's basically a privately owned government office, civilians and press aren't often allowed inside, and neither is picture taking. This is indeed a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for someone like Izuku. "Did you design this office, Todoroki-san?" Izuku asks as he signs in with the receptionist at Todoroki's request. "No, that was Aiko," Todoroki says just as a set of elevator doors ding softly behind them and the manager herself emerges, trusty clipboard in hand. Izuku is actually relieved to see her this time. Besides Todoroki and Aiko, he doesn't know anyone else at the agency, so if Aiko will be giving him the tour, he won't feel as awkward. She's surprisingly nice. "Sign this and you're all set," she says, holding out the clipboard with the company NDA. Once Izuku signs, she takes it and smiles. "Welcome to the Shouto Hero Agency." Izuku presses his lips together tightly and lets out a noise like a kettle boiling before he starts bowing to them both repeatedly. "Thank you so much! It's such an honor! I really can't say it enough!" "We're glad to have you," Aiko says. "Shouto was very keen on it." Todoroki's expression doesn't change, so Izuku is left to flounder until she says, "Let's go up unless you're still enjoying the atrium." "Oh, I am, but let's go." They talk on the elevator ride up, and Izuku learns that Aiko graduated UA a year before Todoroki in the business course. Her business savvy is all hard-earned since her quirk is entirely unrelated. She could turn liquids into any kind of shape she chooses. "It makes us a hit at parties, though," Todoroki says blandly, which makes the other two laugh. They stop on the main work floor, where most of the offices are. The workspace is very inviting and open, the desks not closed in by walls. The windows are big and let in lots of light, and there's lots of seating areas for people to gather. It looks like a really nice place to work. "I'll leave you to it," Aiko says, turning to go. "Oh, you're not giving me the tour?" Izuku asks, surprised. "No, I am," Todoroki says. "Unless you prefer Aiko." "I thought you'd be too busy!" Izuku practically yells before covering his mouth. Todoroki is staring at him with slight uncertainty, and he wants to kick himself over somehow managing to make Todoroki think he would rather not spend as much time together as they possibly can. "No, Todoroki-san, that would be amazing, but don't you have to work? I don't want to be boss." "Fridays are usually mostly for paperwork," Todoroki says, his face pulling into an expression that suggests he's not a fan of this in the slightest. "But I don't have much to do today." "Because he's been staying late at the office the entire past week trying to finish it all," Aiko mentions breezily. "Aiko, you shouldn't have done that!" Izuku gasps. Oh no, now he really feels like he's imposing. "He wanted to," Aiko says before Todoroki can get a word in. "After all these years, I could tell when he's looking forward to something." She bows neatly to the two of them before setting off. "She knows you really well, doesn't she?" Izuku asks, somewhat in awe. "Aiko-san is very cool." "Unfortunately," Todoroki sighs, but he sounds fond. "Where would you like to start?" "You're letting me choose?" Rather unsurprisingly, the rest of the agency is just as impressive as its atrium. Izuku decides to beeline for the surveillance room, which Todoroki says is fine, now that he's under contractual obligation not to spill all their company's secrets. Not that he ever would, but it's good to know they're careful. The control room is mind-blowingly high-tech, and all the people that work there have quirks that help augment their eyesight or awareness in some way. The setup is baffling to Izuku, even when Todoroki and the security team explain it to him, including the train station camera setup, but he's thrilled just to see it all. They make their way through different wings of the facilities, through the state-of-the-art gym and rec room that all employees have access to, before visiting the practice gym reserved only for heroes and sidekicks. This is, of course, where they spend the rest of the morning. There are a lot of people training, but they stop when Todoroki comes in with Izuku to say hello. Izuku recognizes them all. "Chlorophyll! Precision Axe! Ionizer!" and is fairly unable to stop his excitement meltdown at meeting them all at the same time. Is the little guy gonna be okay?" Precision Axe whispers to Todoroki, his bull nostrils flaring with concern as Izuku blushes and sweats and hyperventilates his way through regurgitating Axe's entire heroic history up to that point without taking a breath. Todoroki pats Izuku on the back calmly. "Yeah, he does this. Just give him a minute." It would be impossible to get all of the nervous excitement out of his system, but they all recognize him from the interview already, and he does manage to hold a proper conversation with them. After that, they go back to training, and he and Todoroki say to watch. Todoroki seems to want to hear what Izuku thinks about their sparring, the strategies and usage of their respective quirks. Even though this is a bit nerve-wracking, it's also an immensely interesting challenge, and Izuku does his best to give his own input, ask questions, provide some of the insight he's gained from years of cramped writing collected in countless notebooks. Todoroki listens without seeming to grow tired of it. Next is lunch at the sprawling cafeteria. All the food looks incredible, and Izuku has to try the quesadon, of course. But then the American cuisine section smells so amazing as he walks by that. He also winds up with a huge cheeseburger in honor of All Might. But lately he realizes it would be a travesty not to eat Todoroki's trademark favorite food with the man himself. So he gets a whole bowl of cold soba, which they both slurp together contentedly. Even Todoroki's noodle slurping technique is impressive. After eating it all, Izuku is unable to move for several minutes while Todoroki patiently waits for him to recover. After lunch, they visit the research and development labs and end up spending nearly the whole afternoon there. Todoroki's agency is well funded enough to have its own team of support engineers that develop most of the items and costume improvements in-house. Their work is fascinating to Izuku. Some of it he's studied and researched himself, but the cutting-edge stuff is all new and exciting. Todoroki doesn't try to hurry him along, instead introducing him to the team. They're all too happy to answer Izuku's questions, and he's brimming with them. "I don't want to bother you," he keeps saying until the head of R&D finally tells him he doesn't have to worry about it. "You saved our boss's life, remember?" She asks this finally and effectively stops Izuku's constant fretting. The sky outside the windows begins to turn from blue to pink and orange. It'll be time for Izuku to head back soon, but they stop on the quiet upper floor to say goodbye to Aiko. Walking through the hallways, they pass by a big corner office, and Izuku spots a name on the door. Todoroki Shouto. He thinks he's being very sneaky in walking slower and trying to peek inside, but apparently not, because Todoroki says right behind him, "You can go in if you want." Izuku jumps. Caught. "You don't mind?" Todoroki shrugs, shaking his head. The office on the inside is very nice, but it's not as intimidating as Izuku would expect from a typical pro-hero executive office. There are awards on the wall, and a small but neatly kept trophy case, which gives the illusion that these are stored here more as mementos than due to pride. Many of them are from Todoroki's time at UA, some of them from his earliest years there, and a couple of them... "Oh, award for Best Air Conditioning Unit?" Izuku reads off one of the most ostentatious-looking awards. "My finest achievement," Todoroki says, voice incredibly serious. "Specifically given to me by two illustrious heroes. I'm sure you know of them. Chargebolt and Cellophane. Momo, Creaty made the trophy. That was back in our second year." "Oh my gosh!" Izuku whispers, gazing at the award in newfound awe. There's a lot of stories about the students from Todoroki's year. All Might students. Izuku has devoured them all, but hearing new and silly anecdotes from Todoroki himself is a whole new level of amazing! Todoroki has picture frames on his desk of his friends, his siblings, his mother. There is only one photo of his father, Enji, taken in the past few years, judging by the wicked-looking scar down the left side of the man's face. The relationship between father and son has always seemed strained, clearly evidenced by the Shouto Hero Agency standing separate to Endeavor's sprawling complex. There's not much public info known about why the two are so at odds with each other, and Izuku has never been interested in prying that deep. That particular facet of Todoroki's life is too private, too personal. A tinny beeping noise makes him look up from his snooping to where Todoroki is standing leaning against the doorframe. Todoroki puts a hand to his ear. "Aiko, what's..." He pauses as he listens, his expression going from confused to alarmed. "Great! Todoroki-san?" Izuku asks. "Sorry." Todoroki says, "We have to go. Not here. Somewhere else." "What? What's wrong?" "My old man's here." Todoroki says. He sounds more annoyed than anything else. "Of course he'd turn up today." "Oh!" Izuku says. "Well, I can wait while you..." "No, I don't particularly want to talk to him right now," Todoroki says, "and I'm sure he won't see eye to eye with my taking a day off. He'll come to my office to look for me, so we have to move." They hurry out into the corridor, Izuku following behind Todoroki as they head for the elevators. They very nearly reach them when Todoroki stops dead and hisses, "He's where?" to Aiko, presumably, before grabbing Izuku's arm and dragging him through the first random door nearest them. Izuku yelps. The room they've ducked into isn't a room. It's a tiny storage closet with a couple of shelves digging into Izuku's back. It's barely big enough to fit the assortment of mops and brooms inside it, and it is definitely not big enough to fit two whole people, especially not ones as tall and broad as Todoroki. It's a small blessing that Izuku is as small as the hero is large. All this happens in seconds, and on the other side of the door, Izuku hears the elevators ding as they open. Next, he hears footfalls. Solid, heavy ones. If footsteps could be described as intimidating, then that's what he'd call these. He realizes right away who they must belong to and why they have found themselves here, hiding among the cleaning supplies. "Endeavor!" he hears Aiko call. It sounds like she's down the hall. "What a pleasure to see you."
"Aiko,"
comes the greeting, and wow, Izuku thinks his voice is even deeper in person somehow.
"Is Shouto in his office?"
He's not, I'm afraid."
A strange shudder goes through Todoroki, and he puffs a soft breath through his nose. And Izuku realizes in shock that Todoroki is trying not to laugh. He can't see him very well in the dark, but Izuku stares up at him incredulous and a bit delighted. Todoroki is a little shit. Outside, Aiko continues to painstakingly deter Endeavor from seeking out his son. She probably doesn't realize where they are either, and it's this admittedly hilarious detail that makes Izuku suddenly overly aware of the situation. He's in a tiny closet with Todoroki Shouto, standing so close to him that he can feel each little tremor of laughter that shivers through the other man. Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. Todoroki lets out another quiet huff of air, and it happens. Izuku remembers the gif. Todoroki's captivating eyes staring so intently, and then the lip licking. Suddenly he can't stop thinking about it. Todoroki watching him, Todoroki's lips so close to his ear, like they're talking on the phone, except right now there is no phone. Todoroki is right there, and so are his lips, and they're probably warm and soft. Todoroki has grabbed onto Izuku's arms to steady him. His hands are so big, his fingers can almost touch, encircling Izuku's biceps. So big. Todoroki is really so large in person. The shelves at Izuku's back force him directly into Todoroki's front, and there was little time to arrange himself better before Endeavor appeared. Right now, he's bordering on dangerously gropey, pressed up against Todoroki with his hands resting on the older man's broad chest. It is, Izuku really can't help but notice, exactly as firm as it looks when he's just staring at it from afar, either in real life or in those somewhat risque photo shoots Todoroki very occasionally agrees to, the ones that manage to get him almost or entirely shirtless. Izuku notices distantly that he does run hotter on his left side, the realization a dim roaring in his head, buried beneath the mass of his stupid lizard brain. It's making things below the belt. He's not wearing a belt, but south, distinctly uncomfortable. Aiko is saying something that Izuku doesn't catch, and Todoroki shifts a bit, angling his body so he can turn his head to press one ear against the door. The movement makes him shift. His leg jets out a bit more, and his thigh slots between Izuku's, and Izuku's soul abandons his earthly body. Oh dear! Todoroki is tall, and his legs are much longer than Izuku's, and Izuku has nowhere to go, so he falls forward slightly. The inner seam of his shorts presses firmly against the sturdy bulk of Todoroki's thigh, and he gasps at the pressure. Awful timing, terrible timing, the worst possible timing. Right now, trapped in a closet with Todoroki, with his crotch pressed against Todoroki's thigh, is the most mortifying moment possible for him to pop a boner. If he had any hope of his dignity being spared of Todoroki not noticing, it is quickly dashed when Todoroki goes absolutely still against him. Izuku couldn't say anything, even if there was something to say, because of the danger that Endeavor will overhear. Softly, with no other course of action open to him, he drops his face into Todoroki's chest in shame. This is a mistake too, because with his nose stuffed in Todoroki's shirt, he gets the faintest hint of musky sweat and the scent of some light intoxicating cologne, barely applied, but enough to make Izuku's head swim with something that feels like hunger even after the buffet they'd eaten earlier. He closes his eyes and murmurs as many silent apologies as he can until they hear Aiko say, "Oh, of course, right this way," followed by the clicking of her heels and Endeavor's loud boot falls fading away down the hallway. Once they're no longer audible, Todoroki mutters, "Quick!" Izuku hears him fumble for the handle and the door flies open, nearly blinding him with the bright lights outside. Again, Izuku finds himself being towed along as Todoroki's hand closes around his wrist and they run, making a beeline for the elevators. Todoroki jams the button with his finger frantically until the doors finally open and they tumble inside. To Izuku's bewilderment, he hits the button for the top floor. He might leave, which means we can't go down to the atrium, Todoroki explains, but he won't come up. Izuku nods dumbly. Todoroki is still gripping his wrist, but no sooner does he think about this than Todoroki lets go of him jerkily. They're still standing awkwardly close together, silent, in the elevator. Izuku stares at the floor. Todoroki-san, He doesn't get any further before Todoroki interrupts. "That wasn't very professional of me," he says. "I should have just dealt with it not like a child." "I understand." Izuku swallows painfully. "You didn't want your dad to know I was wandering around here, right?" "It's not that," Todoroki says. "I didn't want him to ruin today, that's all." The doors open and they find themselves at the top of the building. The elevator goes all the way up to the roof. There's a helipad and a pavilion that looks like it might be used for social gatherings. The view of the city from the rooftop is stunning, especially bathed in the pastel colors of golden hour right before the sun sets. Izuku would be awestruck if he didn't feel so horrible. Todoroki must regret everything now for sure this time. Izuku has never felt so low. His dream for so long has just been to meet Todoroki, to talk to him, and somehow let him know the impact he's had on Izuku's life, how much he means to him. But God, not like that! Endeavor hadn't ruined things, but Izuku definitely had, and as much as he wants to slink away and never face Todoroki again, he has to apologize. "I'm so sorry!" he blurts out without explanation. There's no justification he can give. He just bows as low as he can manage. Maybe he should get on his hands and knees. "For what happened back there?" "It's fine," Todoroki says. "That was my fault. After everything you've done, I'm not mad. I'll leave now, and I promise you never have to see me or talk to me again, but I'm really so sorry." "You can't promise that," Todoroki says, raising his voice to be heard over Izuku's panicked stream of consciousness, "because I wanted to ask if you'd like to go to the Heroes Gala next month." Izuku falls silent. Slowly, he straightens out of his bow to look at Todoroki to see if he's joking? Or maybe Izuku completely misheard him. That must be it. "To what?" "The Heroes Gala." Todoroki says so no. Izuku didn't mishear him. "The Heroes Gala?" he repeats faintly. "The annual Japan Heroes Gala?" Todoroki nods. "Yes." Izuku stares at him. Not only is the Heroes Gala one of the biggest and fanciest and most televised events of the year in Japan, but it's also obviously one of the most exclusive. It's part award ceremony, part entertainment show, an event that only the cream of the crop pro heroes are invited to attend. Izuku's mouth feels dry. "How would I go to that?" "With me," Todoroki says, head tilted like a confused puppy. He looks so cute when he does that. Izuku can't help but notice. "I'm allowed a guest." It takes another moment for Izuku to process this. "Wait!" he says, then practically shrieks, "What?" Todoroki's eyes slide away from him. He almost looks nervous, which in itself seems ludicrous. "I should have asked sooner. I know it's a bit last minute now, so I understand if you can't—" "I don't have anything to wear!" Izuku croaks. There's roughly 700 other things he should say instead of this, but none of them come to mind in that instant. All he can think is that he doesn't have a suit nearly nice enough to wear to be allowed into the Heroes Gala. Maru won't got it. Which is terrible because he's never wanted to say yes to something so badly in his life. Todoroki looks at him again. "If I help with that," he says slowly. "You go."
Izuku nods.
And Todoroki does that thing where he doesn't smile with his mouth or even really with his eyes, but Izuku can tell he is smiling somehow. That's just what it looks like on him sometimes, and it's no less happy. He still doesn't understand, though. So he asks, "Why are you inviting me?" The multicolored sky is Todoroki's backdrop standing on the roof so far up, and the breeze blows and lifts his hair like some scene straight out of an anime. "Because it's for heroes," he said. "So I thought you should be there." He then has to try to awkwardly comfort Izuku as Izuku bawls his eyes out for several minutes straight. But Todoroki reassures him as they stand together on the rooftop looking out over the city until the sun drops below the horizon line that he doesn't mind in the slightest.